Welcome to this episode of the Women in Money Cafe podcast. Now, continuing our pension series, we've got another pension episode for you. And this one, we're calling it, I've got 5 pensions. What the heck do I do with them all? And I think it's because it's really not that unusual for everybody to have multiple pensions nowadays. But it can make it feel like really quite overwhelming to try and get on top of it. Because if you've got one pension, chances are that you don't 100% understand it fully. So what would be better than having one thing that you don't fully understand that your future financial security depends on? Having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or, hey, wait for it, even 10. So what we aim to do in this episode is just sort of normalize the fact that it's okay to have multiple pensions, and then how can you streamline it in a way that it's going to make sense to you and that you feel in charge of your financial future. So to help me with this, we've got our resident co-host expert on pensions, Michelle.
Hi, Julie.
Hey there. We've got a special guest with us today from the Women in Financial Advice community. We've got Hannah with us. Hi there, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good, Julie. Are you?
I'm great, thank you. So, Hannah, I'm just going to read out a few words about you, if that's all right, just to introduce you to the listeners. So, Hannah is an ex-dancer turned paraplanner and business owner. We don't get many of them in the cafe. And she places great importance on increasing the roles of women within financial services and educating girls and women about all areas of the industry, which we are completely down with on the Women in Money Cafe. That's what we're all about. So outside of work, apparently, you like walking with your other half and your dog and the theatre and cooking. So we like these things there. Hannah, what we do with guests sometimes is we ask them a random question at the end of the episode, but we thought we would get it up front so that, the listeners have a bit more of an idea about you. So with that in mind, do you have an interesting fact that you feel comfortable sharing with us and the listeners?
So, when I turned 30, maybe a little crisis of identity at the time, I decided I was going to throw myself into several challenges through the year and do some things that scared me. And one of them was to abseil off the Olympic orbital tower, which at the time seemed a brilliant idea. And all the way up seemed a brilliant idea. And as I got to the top, I thought, got to come down now at some point. And it honestly was one of the best things I've ever done, but I'm not entirely sure I would ever do it again.
How high up is that?
It's something like 386 feet. Yeah, it's a long way. It's the big Helter Skelter thing that they built in the Olympic Park, so it's pretty high.
Oh, wow.
And it took about 10 minutes to get down. So it was a good experience, a once in a lifetime, definitely. But I've rethought heights since then a little bit.
All right, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, so let's just sort of dive in then with this situation with regards to people having multiple pensions. And I don't know what your thoughts are, ladies, but I know if I think back to my dad only worked for 2 companies his entire life. And he was with one of them for, 30 odd years and then another one for a little bit more. And so he just had 2 pensions. And I think that was typical of that generation. And one of the things when we were preparing for this episode that I was thinking about is I think it would be really easy for someone, it's just different now. We all have lots of different pensions. But in amongst all the fact you've got all this stuff you don't understand is sometimes we can inadvertently be judging ourselves. Because look at my dad. My dad had 2 jobs. And look at me, I've had God knows how many jobs. And passing judgment on myself. Why can't I stick with one company? Why can't I stick with one job? And it's accepting the fact the world's just different now. It doesn't work like that anymore. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Michelle?
I think it's definitely a generation thing because I can say the same about, my dad. My dad was actually in the armed forces for 30 odd years and then went to work for another company and stayed there. And again, that was quite normal. And I think that's what we see. But today it is different. And I've accumulated a few pensions. My husband has, and pretty much everyone I know has. So again, it's normal. It's normal life. And the pension benefits that you get with companies are different to what they used to be. So that did attract people to stay in companies. And I think nowadays life is a bit different. But also we can have 1, 2, 3, 4 careers in our lifetime. So I would just say it is normal.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is as well is like, if you're a normal person, and bear in mind, people, what I call normal is someone that isn't a financial advisor. if you're a normal person and you're getting pension statements and you've got pensions, I'm going to bet that you don't 100% understand all of that. Or maybe you don't understand any of it. And then to have multiples of these things that you don't understand is then, well, where do you even start to understand what is this and what does it do for me? Because this is your financial future security. And it's all wrapped up in all this paperwork and all these different people that like, who would understand it? And I think that's a big barrier to engaging with your retirement planning. So I don't know, Hannah, have you got any thoughts on just the state of retirement planning for people today?
I mean, that person that you just described is exactly who I was before I worked in this industry. I'd worked in 2 or 3 different jobs. There'd been a pension attached to each of those jobs. And it was only when I started in the financial industry, and I don't know whether it makes it better or worse, but my dad was an IFA. So I probably should have known more about this than I did. I suddenly thought, I've got 2 pensions that I need to do something with. Or it was only when I had that extra knowledge from being in the industry that it dawned on me that they were sat there and, they weren't making me any money. They weren't, in the places I wanted to invest or anything like that. But I wouldn't have had a clue if it wasn't for working in the industry. So I completely sympathize with those people who don't have that knowledge because, well, why would they? It's not their career choice. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that are the same.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Thanks for sharing that experience with us as well. Because I think I think because we've done it for so long, it's really difficult to remember sometimes just how unintelligible some of this stuff is. Because I know that I look at pension work and I'm flipping through page after page after page, trying to find a bit of information that I need, and I actually know what I'm looking for. If you don't even know what you're looking for, like, what's the point?
And you may not understand, but I didn't understand pension. I knew what a pension was. I knew it helped me when I retired. That was probably the extent of it. But I remember them talking and, oh, we'll invest you in this and we'll charge it. I hadn't got a clue. I just yesed and noed in the right places. And I knew that some of my, salary went into it. And that was as far as I was concerned. That was all I needed to know. But there's so much more to it that you wouldn't, like you say, be aware of unless you are aware of it.
All right. So hopefully what we're going to do over the course of the next 20, 30 minutes is just talk you through an approach that you can take if you're someone that's sitting there with multiple pensions, like, I don't know what to do with this lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk you through some of the data that you're looking for and that you can gather. Michelle and Hannah have got some really great stories that they're going to share with us. And then there's a phrase you might have heard of it before, you might not have, and it's this phrase consolidation. And if I've spotted it on Facebook actually, you get ads flashing up sometimes talking about pension consolidation. So I'm going to explain what this consolidation thing is, when you would use it and when you wouldn't use it. And hopefully by the end of the episode, you'll be able to go, right, okay, I'm going to go and dig all that stuff out and I'm going to sift through it, see if I can consolidate or if I shouldn't consolidate. We'll also share with you when you can do it yourself and when you should really get one of us involved. And then once you've got to the end of the episode, you've done that. I've got to throw this phrase in because I love it. Right? We had Pete Matthew on not that long ago, and Pete's top tip was declaring paperwork bankruptcy, which I absolutely love. So once you've followed all these steps, you can declare paperwork bankruptcy on a lot of your pension paperwork, which is going to feel good. Trust me. Absolutely brilliant. Right, so let's dive into this then with regards to this notion of what information are we looking for? Who wants to start? Michelle?
Yeah. So I think it's overwhelming, isn't it? You have statements through the door, you have bits of communication that come through all the time. And it is really overwhelming. And actually, what are you looking for? And that's what probably one of the biggest discussions I have is, well, how do I know? What am I looking for? And I think for me, the first place I'll sort of start with a client is an annual statement. If you have an annual statement, that is going to give you probably 90% of the general information you need to work out what you can and can't do with it. And the thing is, they make it complicated because they never look the same. They're from a different provider. They all look different. One may be 2 pages, one may be 10 pages. And I think that's the daunting thing. So I would start by pulling together those annual statements, and they'll come in at different times because that's just, they can't all do it at the same time. And even if it's a year old, it still allows you, there's nothing to stop you phoning them and saying, can you give me an up-to-date value of my pension? And I think that's the thing, don't be scared of them. Just phone them and ask them. And that's definitely a starting point. Once you've got all of that, you can move on to the next sort of stages as to what you're going to look for. But I would definitely say annual statements, I'll give them a call and ask them.
Okay, thanks for that. So Michelle's top tip then is let's start gathering all the annual statements. Is there any other paperwork, Hannah, that you think we should be looking for?
I think it's useful to know if the plan is already with a financial advisor. If you've maybe had a work scheme and it's been looked after by somebody else, it's useful to know if there is somebody who's overlooking and overseeing the plan. It just gives you an idea of if there's extra charges going out, or if there's a type of investment that, pension is held in that maybe doesn't sit, you don't understand that, or you don't know what it is, then at least there's someone else there that you can ask, as well as just speaking to the providers, because realistically, if it is held through a financial advisor, they should be helping you to an extent as well.
Good point. Good point. I think the other thing I would throw in there as I'm listening to you talk, I'm actually remembering one of the most challenging cases I had. So Trisha is one of my friends who might be listening, and we had to sort out Trisha's pensions. Oh, see, I'm holding my head in my hands now because she's worked for a gazillion housing associations. And it was just really hard figuring out which plan belonged to which period of employment. And because so grab a bit of paper, and it's almost like a CV. I want you to write down everybody you've worked for and roughly the years that you worked for them. Because then once you've got all of Michelle's pension statements together, you can attribute them to an employer, and just it'll help you figure out if there's any gaps. And I say this as someone who accidentally lost an Aviva pension. Right, so I consolidated all my pensions a few years ago, and then my car insurance with Aviva. And it's really good. You log into the Aviva site and you can get your policy documents. And there was another little tab that said pensions. So I thought, never met a button I didn't want to click. So I clicked on the pension one, went in, there's a couple of £1,000 sitting in Aviva in a pension. Like, where'd that come from? Because I thought I'd consolidated all my pensions, but I'd missed this one. And so when I went and did the exercise of who have I worked for, turns out it's actually while I worked for Aviva. But, it can happen to the best of us.
I think the other thing I just thought of, sorry, Julie, to be mindful of is also, as well as where you've worked, it's also whether you can remember in the past contracting out.
Ooh.
Because you may have a little pension sat there, which will have the words, so we're going to build it, but former protected rights, where you contracted out of the state pension. And you may not know what that actually meant when you did it, because I would say 90% of us didn't. But that could be another pot sat there, which is quite valuable.
Good show. Good show. Okay, so that's what I was going to say to you, Michelle. Right, so we've gathered all our pension statements. We've got our work history sitting in front of us. What else should we be doing next?
I think if you're sort of having a look, there's certain things you need to be looking out for, because this is where you would determine whether you need one of us or whether you can go ahead and do it on your own. And I would say the biggest, what we would say, word out there, scary word that we would use is safeguarded benefits. If you see the word safeguarded benefits, which can come about from plans from probably a few years ago, so they generally older plans, be very careful of those, because that's the ones that you do need to come and see one of us about, because you could potentially give up something quite valuable, either a guaranteed income or a guaranteed income later in retirement, or a protected amount of tax-free cash from your pension. So I think you don't have to know the details of what it means, but if you see the word safeguarded on that statement or on that sort of communication you've had from them, that's probably a big warning sign that you might need to go and see somebody else.
All right. And I'm going to throw in here, if you want to know more about safeguarded benefits or any other technical terms that might come up during this episode, I'm going to refer you back to episode 36, which was our episode on pension jargon. It's the one where it's like a quiz where we try to batter through as many stupid phrases and words that we have in the pension world, and we give you the explanation in 2 sentences. So that's episode 36. It's a riveting listen. It was a quiz. I can confirm that I lost. I do believe, Michelle, you won. Well,
I
that's a
think I did.
spoiler alert, folks. Okay, so far then we've got our employment history, we've gathered all our statements, we know that we're looking out for phrases like safeguarded benefits. Hannah, any suggestions on what we can do if we have a sneaky suspicion that we've got another pension somewhere, but we can't find the paperwork for it?
So one of the things that we try to get clients that we work with to look at, as well as obviously looking at job history, is were there any payments? It sounds very silly, but are there any payments going out of your bank into a pension at the moment that you've forgotten about? There's so many direct debits that go out. You might see Aviva or you might, and as you probably did, Julie, oh, well, it's probably home insurance or car insurance or something like that. It could be a pension for all you know. So checking with your bank, through your bank details to see if there's anything there is always a good one.
All right, that's a good top tip, that actually. You've got a right smile on my face there. I think the other one I would suggest as well is you've got a thing called the Pension Tracing Service. And that's a website that you can go in and you put your details in, and it's going to help you track down old employer pensions. This is a free service. If you find a website or somebody that's offering to do it for you for a charge, move on, don't use them. This is a free service that you can get. We'll put a link to the Pension Tracing Service in the show notes, though, for you. Okay, so we've got all our information. We've got a few things that we've got to watch out for. One of the things I really wanted to do with this episode was just kind of normalize this for people, that this is just absolutely normal. So if you're sitting there thinking, I got these pensions, I don't know what to do, and I can't talk to anybody about this, it's not just you. So I know, Hannah, you've got a story that you could share with us that's just going to help people feel a little bit better about the fact they might have 5 or 6 pensions and they're only 30.
Yes. So we've just worked on a case for a client who is probably not more than 40, and he already had 10 pensions, 10 little pension pots. It wasn't as if they all had hundreds of thousands of pounds in. There was just little and often from jobs that he'd worked in. And obviously then we've consolidated or looked to consolidate them all into one easy place for him so that now he can look at, right, how much have I got? When can I retire? It's a lot easier. And all those little ones that the stragglers, I suppose you call them, a few £100s in them, they're all now in one place. And he's not having to worry about collecting all the annual statements and doing it all manually, just there. But yeah, 10 pensions.
All right, okay.
40.
I think if I'm thinking about it from like a listener's point of view, let's say I'm getting 10 pensions and they're all arriving at different times throughout the year. So, in January, I get a statement from Aviva and it says, oh, you've got £500 in this pension. And next month, I'm getting one from Zurich, you've got £700 in this one. And so on and so throughout the year. Each time I'm looking at the statement, I'm seeing a number. I'm like, well, that ain't going to do anything, is it? And then that's just making me feel really disengaged. I'm like, well, what's the bloody point? But when we bring them all together and I'm just dealing with one company, well, that's easier to keep track of. Plus the fact the number's going to be bigger. So I'm going to feel a bit more motivated by that. So we're kind of moving into now the pros and the cons of consolidation of pensions. So I don't know, Michelle, you probably got some good stories as well for us about consolidation and just having multiple pensions.
Yeah, these are the type of cases that I seem to attract. I don't quite know how I do it, but I do. But I do enjoy them, which is the other thing I don't admit to many people. But I've had a few which have had 8, 9, 10 pensions. And the one I'm thinking of I've done more recently was again 10 pensions. And the chap was in his 50s and he had no idea what he had, where it was. Now, the difference was he sort of came to me with all this paperwork and there were different types of pensions in there. So then it's a case of going back, having a look at what they are. And this was definitely where a financial advisor would be needed because there was something called a defined benefit pension, which we haven't mentioned yet, which was in there, which is a pension which gives you a guaranteed income for life based on your service and pay with a previous employer. It's not the same as having a pot of money invested, which fluctuates up and down, which is what your normal workplace pensions are nowadays. But he had 3 of those, and then he had your normal pensions. Then we had a couple of the ones with the safeguarded words on. So it definitely took me a little while to work my way through them all. And in the end, we did a combination of things because it was then working out about what his income would be, what he would need in retirement. But eventually we moved 2 of the defined benefit pensions. We kept one of them. We moved some of the sort of old workplace pensions, but we kept some of the old legacy ones with safeguarded bits on because they have sort of tax-free cash and things associated. But we had to build a plan for this. So this was probably the most complicated one I've done. But it just showed at the end of it that we'd managed to build him a plan, and he absolutely had no idea what these were worth. And by the time we'd finished, we had a few 100,000 sat in a pension pot for him. When he came to me, he thought there was tens of thousands.
Wow.
So to have that difference, and then to be able to say to him, do you know what? You can retire at 55 or you can retire at 60. And I think that's the beauty that I love about the job. And that's why I enjoy those, because until you bring it together, you can't quite see what you have. And sometimes you may start lower, but if you consolidate and you've got tens of thousands, you've got an aim to then build that up, and you can see it building quite visually. But if you're going towards the end of your career and actually wanting to retire, to bring them all together and to be able to say to somebody, you can reduce your hours if you want to, because it's here. You've got some income. We can plan this out. That's fantastic. So it's definitely normal. And I've done a few like that. And the benefits of watching how that makes someone feel, the well-being of that brings is amazing.
I think as well, sorry, just to jump in on the end of that, you were saying about, the valuation of seeing it all in one place and showing him what he actually had compared to what he thought. I think there's a little element, I suppose, for working with one of us as well, is a lot of these plans have charges on that, everyday people don't have a clue. We've just done not a 10 pension, but a smaller one where the client was paying something like 3%, which is very, very high compared to, the rest of the industry. And afterwards, I think she was on less than 1. And to be able to say to her, well, this is what you could have had. This is what you were paying. And now that money, instead of going to the company or to the old advisor, whoever it was, is now going to sit in your pension, and it's going to grow. And that's going to then help in the future. It puts into perspective that she wouldn't have known that had she just looked at her annual state. She'd have just thought that was normal for that company. So it's nice to be able, like you say, to have that plan. You can look at different parts of it, like value, like charges, and really give that benefit to the client.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Hannah. And let's just put our cards on the table here. A 3% annual management charge on the pension is high. Right, we look at these figures all day, so we know what's high and what isn't. You're seeing them for the first time, so you've got no idea. Personally, my eyes start to water after 2%.
Yep.
Getting under 2%, ideally, I like 1%. But if it's doing something fancy, I can cope with 2. 3, no, it's never happening. Can I just come back to your case for a second, Michelle? All right. Could you give us a ballpark figure of how long it took you to understand all those pensions?
Bearing in mind what I do and what I like and the pensions. So when I would work on cases, we get familiar with stuff and we get used to what to look for. We get used to where we're going. Now that case actually took me 5 weeks to put together, in terms of once I had all the information, it's then working it through and the various options of what I could and couldn't do with different things, because I had choices. And that's the thing that pensions give you. They give you choices. Now that gave me a little bit of a headache, I'm not going to lie, because I had to then decide which were the best choices to make and which was the best way to go. But that was sort of 5-6 weeks of me bringing that together. And, we write reports, as you know, Julie. So anyone who's worked with an advisor will know that you get a nice recommendation report from us. Now that was probably the chunkiest recommendation report I've ever written, and would send anyone to sleep probably within 10 minutes. But it was just the amount of data to go through. So I fully appreciate how overwhelming it can be. And again, but you just have to think these are options. All those bits of paper are options for you later. And that's the way I always view it with clients. There's different ways of doing things.
No, thanks for that. I think I knew it was going to be a long time. And that's why I wanted to hear how long, so that people are sitting there and they may be thinking, I don't understand all this stuff. Well, here we've got an expert, right? And this is what she does all day long. And it took her 5 weeks. to be able to understand and put together a plan. So please don't berate yourself if you're like, I can't do this, I can't handle that. That's when you call one of us and if you need help. All right. But so we kind of touched on loosely what consolidation is and what the benefits of it are. And we have kind of touched on why you wouldn't do it. But if we could just address that sort of on its own right now for people. So who wants to give me a definition of what this phrase pension consolidation is?
I mean, I can give you I suppose the definition as per the reports tends to be, consolidate for ease and simplicity when sort of preparing for your retirement. That's what I suppose the jargon is. But I do like these words, ease and simplicity. I think it is true. If you don't have a background in financial services and you are looking at all these pensions and thinking, where do I start? You want it to be easy. You want it to be simple. And if you have consolidated and put everything in one place, then you're only having to, you're looking from 10 different groups of pieces of paper to the one. And hopefully that way will have a little bit more understanding of what it is that your pension can provide for you rather than trying to figure it all out from all these different providers who, as Michelle said, don't always have the same paperwork. Everything looks different. So if it's all easy and simple, then, it's worth doing.
Right. Thanks for that, Hannah. Anything you would add, Michelle?
I think for me, that one of the big things about consolidation is flexibility. Now, a lot of older plans and some of the plans you may have had through your workplace won't allow you to maybe access your pension benefits as and when you want to, because some of them will have specific rules. Some of them won't allow you to do anything flexible. And I think that's when, if you've got one pot that you can access as you need to, that is the simplicity, as Hannah said. It is that side of it. And if you're trying to go to 10 different providers and now let you have this bit and you have to take this in, one form, or you're allowed to have one withdrawal a year, or you're allowed 4 withdrawals a year, or you can have as many as you like, that's really hard to manage to actually know what you have left. At the end of the day, that's our income for probably around 30 years of our life.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we can keep track of that. So I would say, alongside the simplicity, one of the main reasons clients will want that is because they want the flexibility to be able to shape their retirement as they want it to look, because they're all different. All retirements are different.
All right. Now that's great. So, in a nutshell, then, what we're talking about is taking your pension from Aviva, Legal & General, Zurich, whoever else you can think of, picking them up and chucking them all in one pension fund. So you're just dealing with one company. Now, I think a legitimate question that a client or a listener would come back to us with, oh, is that not a bit risky, though, having it all with the one company? Because we're always talking about diversification, aren't we? And now we've just told everybody go and stick all their pension with one company. Like, whoa, hang on, that doesn't make sense. Does anybody want to explain to the listeners why it's not risky to do this?
I suppose if you had several pension pots, they could all be invested, because 9 times out of 10, when we talk about diversification, we're referring to the way that you're invested. So all those plans could really be invested in the same way, but they're just with different providers. So nothing is really changing by consolidating the providers into one pot if the funds that you're invested in are staying the same. Makes sense?
All right. So we can have one provider. What matters is how it's invested. That's where we want the diversification. We do not need diversification of providers. That offers no benefit and it only adds headaches. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
That's fair to say.
Okay, so that's kind of the benefits of a consolidation. Michelle, you mentioned earlier reasons not to consolidate, and that was, you said, one of these big words that if we see the word safeguarded benefits, head for the hills, don't touch it, don't move it without talking to one of us. Are there any other reasons why we wouldn't consolidate?
I think sometimes if it's something that you're not comfortable doing and you want to go and get advice to do that, sometimes the cost of that advice, we'll be honest, can outweigh the benefit to you, because you'll pay for that advice. But any advisor you see will talk to you about that. But also sometimes it's not recommended, depending on what you have and what it's going to do for you, particularly if your current workplace plan You don't want to consolidate that because you're receiving your employer and your employee contributions. That's your free money from your employer, effectively. So I've had many that say, well, surely I can put that in there. And you're like, no, we need that where it is, So there are reasons why not to. And it's just about timing. If you're coming up to retirement, that's the optimum time to do it. You don't have to do it before that. There's many reasons why you could and why it's simpler. I think there's even a TV advert at the moment, which is actually talking about consolidating your pensions and how easy it is. And it's encouraging you to do that. But also don't feel you're abnormal if you don't want to yet. If you're happy as they are, don't worry about it. But if it's something that's on your mind and you want to get it sorted, then that's when you go down that route. We may say to keep pensions for various reasons, and that's probably more technical reasons. And that's when you've seen those scary words. And that's when we'll say, no, you're better off keeping it where it is. And we'll explain why. If you don't have those words, there's generally probably not many reasons why you wouldn't, but don't feel weird if you don't, because not everyone does.
I like that. We're all unique, aren't we? Yeah. So then it's like the practical side then. So I've listened to you guys and I've paused and I've ran off and I've got all my pension statements and I'm now sitting here. It doesn't say safeguarded benefits on it anywhere. They all look quite vanilla. I read them all and I've had to have a lot of caffeine, but I've turned the podcast back on and I'm like, okay, what the hell do I do with them now? I got all the paperwork. Michelle, I got it. What do I do now?
So doing it yourself is perfectly viable. And there are many providers out there that will do that for you. So there's lots of I'm not sure we'll mention lots of them by name, but there are lots of them out there. And you can go to them, you give them your pension details, you input it, and they do it all for you. So they do the transfer. So I actually have a family member who was very simple, wanted to actually consolidate 3 pensions. We discussed it. Their circumstances are that they didn't want to take advice because there's certain reasons. And I sort of guided them to different places, said, these are your options. And he's gone away and he's done it himself. He literally plugged in the information of his pensions and he messaged me a week later and said they're all now in progress of being consolidated.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
And for him, that was amazing. And the investment choices, I think, that's something to be mindful of. I think we had the picking your investment funds that we have done before, but they will generally give you pathways. So they do try and make it simple for you. So they're not asking you to pick certain investments. They're giving you ideas of where you might feel comfortable and may give you one of 4 choices.
All right, fantastic. If you go back to episode 79, which was how to start a pension fund, you'll hear us talk about the different providers that you might want to look at, depending on whether you're a DIYer or whether you want a robot to do it for you. I haven't tried a few of these myself. I know what will happen when you start the process. You'll go on the website or on their app and you'll start the process of opening a pension. And then it'll ask you, do you want to add any transfers? And this is where you start to input the details from all those statements you've got sitting in front of you. So the kind of things they're going to want off you is the name of the company, the policy number, and they might ask you roughly how much is in it. Don't worry if the value you've got is 12 months out of date. Just stick it down anyway. It'll be fine because they will send the whole lot over to the new pension provider. And when you log in, they'll maybe give you little updates as well where they're up to, or they might give you a kick up the backside, say you haven't done this yet. Here's a form we sent out to you. Do you want to do it? Or they might have a little message saying we've given them a kick up the backside because we've asked for the money and they haven't sent it to us yet. But they'll manage that process for you. So that is quite a simple process to do. But there are various reasons why you might want to get one of us involved. And I think Michelle gave a really good example there. She's got a client that thought he had tens of thousands of pensions. Turns out he's got hundreds of thousands of pensions. If you come and ask one of us to do it, I think probably one of the biggest questions you're going to have is how much is that going to cost? And I don't think it's an unreasonable question. And Hannah, I'm just giving you a little heads up. I'm going to put you on the spot in a minute. Okay. But different advisors will charge in different ways. Some will charge you a flat fee for the work. So they'll look at everything that you've got and they will make an estimate of how much work's involved with that. And they will quote you a fee that's just pounds. To do that, it's going to cost you X pounds. Other advisors will say, we'll charge you a percentage of any money that we move. And that could be, I'm going to do the thing again now that I'm not meant to. See if it's above 3%, my eyes start to water. I like 1%. I can put up with 2%. This is becoming my catchphrase now. These are just my opinions, though, and advisors charging more than 3%. Feel free to send me hate mail. I'm okay with that. So can you guess what I'm about to put you on the spot about Hannah, right? So Hannah, we said at the start, Hannah's a paraplanner, and we didn't actually explain what that was, all right? So Hannah's job is to make financial advisors look good. So we turn up and we look pretty, don't we, Michelle?
We do sometimes.
And then sometimes you have people like Hannah that work in the background with us, and they will pull all the technical stuff together. They'll do all the research. Quite often they tend to know a lot more than financial advisors. I think it's okay to say that, with the exception of Michelle, who just knows everything. So Hannah, because you work with lots of financial advisors, I'm going to guess you see a variety of ways advisors charge for this kind of thing. So listeners are like, I can't be bothered. I nearly said I can't be asked. I can't be bothered doing all this. Oh, I did it, didn't I? I just want an advisor to sort all out for me, but is that going to be affordable for me? So can you give us sort of rough ideas of what this might cost?
So, firstly, what I will say is that a lot of the time, a financial advisor will give you the option of taking the money from the actual pension pot. So when the money has gone into the pension and it's been consolidated, say it was 1.5%, hypothetically, then they will take 1.5% out of your pension of the total amount, and that will be the advisor's cut. So although that is coming out of your pocket in the future, the hope is that the plan will grow and the money will grow to cover that 1.5%, and you won't notice the difference. Some advisors will offer that. Most advisors will offer that. There will be the odd few that would like you to physically pay it from your bank account. So that, if people are worrying about costs, I always think is a nice way of looking at it to start with, because actually you might not feel that cost go out because it's coming from the pension. In terms of, I suppose, what I see on a day-to-day, it can be anything. And I feel like you're not going to love this, Julie. It can be anything I've seen from 0.5% to 3.5%. A lot of the time, and the majority of advisors that I tend to work with, it will be a case that they will say, it's a tiered structure. There's more in your pension, and therefore we're not going to be silly. We want you to have the most in your retirement pot that you can. And therefore they'll come to some agreement with you. And most advisors, I'd like to think a very high percentage of advisors would think like that, because at the end of the day, yes, there is a lot of work involved, but they don't want you to be out of pocket either now or in the future. I think more advisors are starting to work on a fixed rate basis. So they'll say it's going to be £1,000, £2,000, whatever it may be. And again, taking it out of the pot might be a better way to do it, because you're not going to feel that, if you say to someone, if you've got £3,000 spare in your bank account to pay your advisor, you're more likely to say, take it from the pension. But yeah, it's a very, very varied ballgame. And I think you need to know what your financial advisor is doing. As Michelle said, it's 5 weeks worth of work. It's a lot in that situation. If it was the consolidation of 2 pensions and it was only going to be a week's worth and they're charging you a much higher rate, then you need to think if that's the right financial advisor for you to work with. Are you getting the most benefit from working with them for your pensions?
All right, that's really good. Thank you. Considering I put you on the spot and it's something that people get twitchy about.
Okay.
Right, so you've got all your pension savings in front of you and you've added it all up and there's X amount of pounds in there. So if you work out what 3% of that is, that's really the upper band that you should be prepared to pay roughly, unless you've got weird and wacky stuff in there that's going to take Michelle 5 weeks to figure out. Okay, then it's different. Then that's giving you an idea of what you might have to pay. And also then bear in mind what Hannah was saying. The pension fund can pay for the advice, so you don't need to actually physically take it out of your bank account. Is there anything that you would add to that, Michelle?
No, I think Hannah's very right. And I know from my point of view, I will very much look at what type of plans they are. I've got a very good idea when I can see what type of plans they are, how long that's going to take me. And I think with these cases, also when you've got a consolidation, I very much work on a fixed fee. I will estimate what I think it's going to take me and base my fee on that. Now, the reason I do that is because if you've got a percentage fee, I have some clients who go, well, you're going to transfer all of it, aren't you? Because you want the maximum fee. I'm not like that anyway. However, that is something that is out there. So I feel if I can justify the time I'm going to spend to look at all these plans and I have a fixed fee, one, the client has certainty of what they're going to pay. And two, if I've underestimated, that's my fault. If I've overestimated, that's my fault. But I've generally got a fairly good idea of what that's going to take me. And I just don't want anyone to assume I'm going to move something that I maybe shouldn't because of that reason. So I would say a lot of advisors do have that in their head too.
All right, that's a really good point. And I think everybody knows what my thoughts are on fees. I'm a flat fee person. I like flat fees. So, and I hang out in a lot of the personal finance forums, and I know this is one of the gripes that a lot of you have is this percentage charging. So if you're with an advisor and they are talking about percentage charging, or even before you get to that point in the conversation, you are quite within your rights to say, could we do this on a fixed fee basis, please? Bulk of them are going to say yes.
Definitely.
All right. Although their standard way of doing it might be percentages, if you just say to them, I would prefer a fixed fee, I would be very surprised if they said no. So go and challenge this percentage nonsense. I didn't call it nonsense, sorry. It's a traditional way of doing it. But let's just get really clean and transparent, like Michelle said. So go and challenge advisors. We want flat fees.
Definitely.
All right. So then just to kind of wrap it up then. So we've talked people through how to start gathering all the data and making sense of their employment timeline, tracking down old pensions, keywords to look out for and when to get one of us involved, and just the benefits of consolidation, which is just less headaches. Is there anything that we've missed, do you think?
I don't think there is. I think, again, it's how you feel about it. I think if it's overwhelming you, as we said, the paperwork, you don't want all that paperwork. And that was the one thing with that client with the 10 pensions. I gave him back the original paperwork and he actually said, I'm having a bonfire in the garden and I can get rid of all of it because he'd kept everything. And he was so happy that he just has this one statement that drops through the door, from that side of it. And that's all I kind of deal with. And the other bits he says, I know I have them, I can file them, that's fine. But the rest of it is just unnecessary now. And he was over the moon.
I'm feeling the joy for him. I'm feeling the joy. Hannah, is there anything you would like to add?
I feel like we've covered everything pretty well.
All right. All right, look, Hannah, thank you very much for joining us. And Michelle, thank you for being the resident expert. So I've mentioned already, right? Episode 36 is the one with all the pension jargon in it, okay? And episode 79 is how to start a pension, which will give you some of the providers that you can maybe go and check out. So we're going to have one more pension episode for you in this series. But if you've got any more pension questions that we haven't covered, do send them in to me. You can best way just reach me on Instagram, Julie Flynn Money Woman, and I will pick it up and we'll cover it all. But until next time, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening and take care of yourself.